This one's wife, out of her depth. Hello, I'm H.G. Tudor. Let's bring up the photograph that appears in the thumbnail. There we are. Now, have a good look at this photograph. Let's just pause for a moment to allow you to take in what are you seeing there. Take a few moments to analyse this photograph and perhaps collate some thoughts as to what you think is going on in this photograph. Okay, this photograph is a fantastic example of showing a narcissist out of her depth. I have consistently explained to you that this one's wife's narcissism proved fantastic at getting her into this elevated position, which is far beyond what someone of her ilk would have expected to have achieved. Remember, this individual is a mediocre actress who lacks a sense of humour, who has no charisma, who isn't talented, who isn't particularly intelligent, that purportedly made her way in the world as a consequence of putting something behind her ears, no, not fragrance, her ankles, and in so doing would have just bumped along as an unheard of or relatively unheard of narcissist, occupying cable series and perhaps straight to what used to be called straight-to-video productions. Few people in the world would necessarily know about her. Her narcissism would have operated to ensnare her husband, an intimate partner primary source as it did with Trevor Engelson. It would have caused her, perhaps, to have a small coterie, those sources that could be relied upon. But much of the world would not have heard about this one's wife. She would have just bumped along as an ordinary, mediocre, mid-range narcissist somewhere in the United States. But as a consequence of the narcissism driving her to seek the prime aims, as a consequence of her narcissism essentially causing her to social climb, to try and better herself, it caused her to decide to look to the United Kingdom to try and find a victim. As you know, I talked about my early brush with this one's wife when she was on the hunt for a British husband. And as we all know, she eventually ensnared Prince Harry. Her narcissism really knocked it out of the park there. Not because Harry's especially special of himself, but what he belongs to, what he's part of. It enabled her to suddenly become internationally infamous. It enabled her to access a world of privilege and wealth, the likes of which she could have never ordinarily got anywhere near. She joined the British royal family. The world knew her name. She appeared on the covers of magazines. She had a multi-million-pound wedding that was beamed around the world. She was welcomed by those in the United Kingdom, with some, of course, recognising early on that she was problematic, but most people giving her a chance. And thus, this enabled her to assert control over millions of people, draw fuel from millions of people, acquire character traits from all of the people that she would have access to that ordinarily she would not, and gain those residual benefits of access to networks, facade management, and wealth. You know the story thereafter, as her narcissism then caused her to fuck it up. But it catapulting her into the royal family posed a problem, because whilst it enabled her to hit the jackpot with regard to those prime aims, it then necessitated her being able to stay gripping that jackpot, and this is where she struggled. Whilst the Princess of Wales was a commoner when she joined the royal family, she's brighter than this one's wife. She's not going to set the world alight academically, Catherine, but she's no dummy. But what she has is emotional empathy, which has enabled her to be able to converse with whoever she happens to be with. It's the old be able to talk from pauper to a prince situation. Because she has a genuine interest in those around her, because she's kind, because she's compassionate, because she's fun, because she has a sense of humour, even though she was a commoner, and it will have taken some adaptation. Adapt she did to the demands of service and the royal family, so that, apart from the bigoted nature of the Sugars, many people adore Catherine, or at the very least recognise that she does a jolly good job as the Princess of Wales. She has managed to swim, if you will. She was thrown in at the deep end, and she has swum. But with this one's wife, she was out of her depth from the very beginning. She was out of her depth because her narcissism got her into a position which was fantastic for her vis-a-vis the prime aims, but then it lacked the necessary machinery and narc-craft, if you will, to keep her in that position. She had no emotional empathy to enable her to read the room. Her cognitive empathy was not honed enough to enable her to read the room in the way that many more evolved narcissists, such as myself, can do. She doesn't have any charisma. Certain narcissists have bagloads of it. She's not magnetic. Again, certain narcissists have magnetism to such a degree that all of the cutlery in a room flies towards them as soon as they enter it. When it comes to personality, you'd rather watch a plank warp than spend time with this one's wife. Thus, because of all of these failings, the fact she's not too bright, the fact that she's got no charisma, that she's not magnetic, that because her middle range style, narcissism makes her particularly self-absorbed, this meant that she was out of her depth when it came to the conventions and protocols of the royal family. And rather than embrace them and learn them and recognise that she could use this and harness them to her benefit vis-a-vis her narcissism, as you know, she fought against it, sought to change it, and then complained about it before running away to Canada and the United States. She lacked the equipment to ensure that she could swim with the royal family. This picture, taken in Nigeria, once again demonstrates how she's out of her depth. You will notice that she sat with Dr. Ngozi from the World Trade Organization and another lady, I think is it Mo somebody or other. Now, we have security stood right behind her. It almost looks like he's been photoshopped in. But this prominent individual who stood right over her, guarding her, it looks ridiculous. Royal protection officers ordinarily, for instance, for other members of the royal family, blend in. They ensure that the security is there but isn't seen, or you have to look hard to find it. They're a few paces away. They're not central to the picture. But of course, this one's wife loves the idea of being made to feel important, and therefore having a security guy stood right behind her causes her to draw attention to herself, and therefore it's something that she would want, even though it looks patently ridiculous. You have this quite capable-looking individual, all in black, wearing his shades, that's completely incongruous with everything else that's going on around him. But it doesn't end there. You only have to look at the expressions on the faces of the two women that are with this one's wife. They'd rather be somewhere else. Dr. Ngozi looks like she's going to put her hand up and say, "Send me a stiff brandy. I need that to get me through this." The lady in green looks like she's about to whisper in Dr. Ngozi's ear to apologise for seating her next to the Duchess of Industrial Beige. The lady to her left looks like she is biting her tongue to stop herself from saying, "Fuck me! Who seated me next to this dullard? Oh, my days! Fuck my life! Why am I at this table?" But notice also the way that people are dressed. All of the women that you can see in that picture, those in the foreground, those in the background, are covered up. The lady to this one's wife's left, her arms are covered, her chest area is covered, her shoulders are covered. Dr. Ngozi, similarly, the lady in green, similarly. The lady behind sort of sat at 7 o'clock to this one's wife with the quite majestic headgear entirely covered up. And you can see in the background, most of the women there are similarly covered up. One lady, her arms are on display, but her shoulders and chest are covered. They are all complying with the conventions of showing respectful dress. And then look at this one's wife. Spaghetti straps, shoulders on display, arms on display, chest, if she had one, on display. Disrespectful, out of her depth, unable to read the room. Notice also the expression on this one's wife's face. Uncertainty, anxiety, nervousness. This is a woman who claimed, through a revision of history, that she's 43% Nigerian. And she has gone to Nigeria expecting to find that the people there will behave like African Americans in the United States. And it's worlds apart. But what she's come up against is a culture that she doesn't understand because she's not bothered to understand, because she's so arrogant and self-absorbed. She doesn't take an interest in the places that she goes to. She thinks the place that she goes to is wholly interested in her. Time and time again, we saw on that tour the way that she dressed was not in keeping with the environment in which she found herself, be it a school or a more conservative nation. Yet she kept on showing acres of flesh until later on someone clearly must have had a word with her and she adjusted her dress accordingly. But what you see here in this picture are individuals who clearly don't want to be with her. And also this one's wife shows that she's out of her depth. That is a nervous grin. You can see the anxiety in her eyes. And we've seen this on repeated occasions. You see, notwithstanding the fact that she barges in front of people, sharpens her elbows, goes where she's not wanted, alongside that, she regularly finds herself in situations that threaten her sense of control because she's out of her depth. Because, one, she lacks the ability to understand people by virtue of an absence of emotional empathy and misfiring cognitive empathy. Two, she has no natural charisma that might ride over those shortcomings. Three, she doesn't have any magnetism that would draw people to her in that way, which again would overlook perhaps the inefficiencies of her cognitive empathy. That four, she has no interest in the places that she goes to. As I just mentioned, she expects the place to be interested in her, not for her to be interested in the place that she goes to. And that means she doesn't do her homework. You can bet your bottom dollar that the likes of Kate and William are briefed on where they're going, they read up on it, so they're able to ask interesting questions and understand more about what the place they're going to. In some instances, this will be because they're genuinely interested, it's something that's close to their heart. In other instances, it's just done out of politeness. After all, there's only so many biscuit factories that you can become excited about. With this one's wife, she doesn't bother doing the homework. Therefore, all she can do is talk about herself. As I've explained in a previous video, has she talked about the problems about Nigeria? No. She just comes out with Western platitudes about mental health, which are meaningless to them. Talking about how she sees herself in all of the children. What the fuck is all that about? But that again demonstrates that she's out of her depth. And we see this time and time again with this one's wife. That's why you see the jaw clenching, the batting of the eyelashes, these strange head movements, the talking to herself, the waving her arms around like a pissed-up ninja. All of that happens as an anxious response to threats to control posed by the fact that she's out of her depth. Her threats to control are actually more often than certain other narcissists because of a consequence of her being out of her depth. And this picture encapsulates a woman who not only is not particularly popular, surrounded by people who aren't really pleased about being with her, but an individual who is clearly experiencing anxiety because she's experiencing those threats to her control because she simply doesn't know what to do. She doesn't know what to do because she's out of her depth, and she's out of her depth for all the reasons that I've explained in this video. I'm H.G. Tudor. Thank you for listening.